There's Just Something About Kansas City is brought to you in part by the generosity of our friends at the Cockrell Family Foundation, the Bergman family, and the Sherman Family Foundation. Thank you.
Welcome once again to another episode of There's Just Something About Kansas City. I'm your host, Frank Bohl, and we talk about the people, places, and things that make this such a great place to live. And we'll just call him the voice of Kansas City, okay? Because every time you hear his voice, the first thing you think about is Royals baseball, because he is Royals baseball, the one and only Denny Matthews. Denny, how are you, buddy?
Excellent.
Good?
Thanks, Frank, yeah.
Good deal. Yeah, it's really good to see you. You and I have known each other for a long period of time. I got here in 1981, and I remember it was right after the World Series. I started on April Fool's Day, 1981, and the Royals are coming off the World Series, lost to the Phillies in 80. And the first few days of the baseball season, I was in Houston, Texas, because the Kings were playing the Houston Rockets in the Western Conference semifinals. That's how long ago this was, okay?
Wow.
We had a basketball team. So I was there, and then I came back up, I think it was maybe the 6th or 7th or whatever of April, and the Royals were already playing and stuff. And one of the first people I met, I know you probably don't remember this, but one of the first people I met was you. We were talking up, and you asked me, you said, well, who are you, and where are you from, and what are you doing here? And
Yeah.
you're giving me the old Inquisition. Well, now it's my turn to get you back for all that.
All right, that's fair enough.
So how are you, man? How are things with you? Good?
Fine, doing fine.
Things are good? Yeah.
Yes.
Baseball's good? Baseball's been good to you?
It has.
So,
It's been a great job.
yeah, right,
And
right.
I never expected to be here for 120 years because I always, growing up in Illinois and right in the middle of Chicago, St. Louis, I figured if I got a baseball job, those would be dream jobs, especially the Cardinals, because my
Sure.
dad was a Cardinal fan. Where I grew up, they had a radio station that carried the Cardinals. So that's all I heard while I was growing up was Cardinal baseball. Harry
Yeah.
Caray and Jack Buck.
Wow.
That's all I knew.
Wow. I mean, and that is incredible. And you know, I don't think people realize either, talk about growing up, your mom and dad, and, the whole thing with George and Eileen over
Yeah.
there in Illinois. In Illinois, you're either, like you said, Cardinals fan or a Cubs fan.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, nobody ever liked the White Sox anyway. But you're one or the other. So to grow up and then to hear those individuals, how young were you when you thought, you know what, I'd really like to do what those guys are doing? But let's do it this way. Okay, I don't think people realize how good an athlete you were when you were a kid. Okay, you're a football player, you're a baseball player, you love the sport of hockey and played senior leagues around here forever. I remember that. I said, Denny Matthews plays hockey? I said, you got to be kidding me. But you growing up, you did it all, and you were a really good athlete. I mean, and your dad was too, right?
My dad was the first All-American baseball player at Illinois State. He also played basketball. He was very good, and 3 younger brothers, and he taught all of us to play baseball, to respect the game,
Yeah.
and so on and so forth. And he encouraged us. He didn't press us. He'd come to the games, but he'd give you a little tip here and there, but it wasn't the father that's on you all the time.
Yeah,
And if
right.
you made an error in the 6th inning and you were 8 years old, you're in trouble. You weren't going to get dinner. But no, he was great, and of course, my mom always had dinner ready, no matter how long practice was.
That's the way with the plate over top of the warm plate, right, to
You
keep
got it.
everything warm, right?
Sure.
Because back in those days, there weren't any microwaves. I mean, people don't realize you had to heat the oven up to reheat the meal. Okay, it wasn't just going to zap it with a microwave, right?
Yeah, and never a complaint.
No.
And it was great. It was a great way to grow up. But to answer your question, because I played sports, that's fun. I mean, that's what you grow up doing. And I wasn't thinking broadcasting baseball. I would listen to the games. Summer nights, I'd lay in front of a radio, and I had baseball cards, and they'd talk about a player, and I'd find him on the baseball card. And it was fun. It was relaxing. And little did I know that laying in front of that radio, listening to Jack Buck and Harry Caray and then the Chicago guys, Cubs had a great broadcaster named Jack Quinlan, who died in an auto accident in '62, I think, in spring training. And he was at the peak of his career. I was sad. But about the same time, remember Kenny Hubbs, who played second base
Yes.
for the Cubs? He died in an airplane crash, private little airplane. So those two things. But, yeah, I was laying there listening to the game, And I was getting a great education in broadcasting baseball. I didn't take it as such at that point in time. Sure. I was enjoying the game and what they were saying. But no tuition, no homework, and I'm sitting there getting a pretty good college education in broadcasting baseball.
Yeah, but you went on to Illinois Wesleyan, right?
Yep.
And you played baseball. Yep. You actually played football as well, right? Correct?
Yes.
And I think I don't know if you still hold the record, but you did one time for football for receiving, right? And then you played baseball. I think you even got a tryout with the Decatur Giants, right? I believe while you were in college. So
yeah, the Giants had a farm team in Decatur, which is only an hour drive, and a guy by the name of Thompson was their head scout in the Midwest, and he had seen Wesleyan play, I guess, a few times. And Art Stewart was also around. I didn't know Art at
God
the time.
bless Art, yes.
Yeah. But Gene Thompson sent me a little letter and said, would you like to come down to Decatur and just work out, just see what's going on? So I did. And he said, would you be interested in signing a contract, a minor league contract? And I said, well, this was in August, and I was getting ready to try to play football for the first time. I didn't play in high school.
Right.
But the quarterback at Illinois Wesleyan.
Which is amazing in its own right. Go ahead.
Well, the quarterback at Wesleyan, he convinced me it might be a good deal. Wesleyan had never had a wide receiver. They always had a wing back, which is a halfback. That
they're
just on
running the old wing tee.
Yeah, something like that. And he had a great arm, and he was really a good athlete. And so I said to Gene Thompson, I said, well, I'm going to enroll at Wesleyan. That would have been my sophomore year. I'm going to go for my second year at Wesleyan, and I'm going to play football. Went home, told my dad what happened, and he said, well, I'll tell you what, if you're good enough at baseball, you play 2 more years at Wesleyan after this your sophomore year, and if they're still interested and you want to do it, do it. But he said, I would go ahead and get my college education, and you're not going to get out of the house. I'm going to lock the doors and make sure you're going to go to finish your college education.
Yeah.
If you're good enough, they'll come find you.
Right. And folks, they weren't signing for $3 or $4 million out of high school.
No, they weren't, no.
In those days. It was probably free lunch somewhere and maybe $100 a month or whatever they were going to give you if you play for the Decatur Giants.
Yeah, exactly.
But you were good enough for them to come to you. And I know you don't, you don't talk about yourself a lot, but the deal is you were good enough that they had seen you and had thought, hey, you know what, this kid has some potential. So what did you play when you were a baseball player? What was your position?
In high school, you play shortstop because you're probably the best baseball player on a high school team.
Right.
So I played shortstop, but that wasn't my position. Second base was really my position, which oddly enough was my dad's position when he was an All-American.
Well, I think there's a lot to do with the genetics there anyway. I think your dad was probably pretty much your hero at that point.
Yeah, but second base. And you feel, I've talked to different professional baseball people about this. This is my own little theory. And you can now identify with this because you're a good athlete. If you play any form of baseball, softball, at any age, there is a position in baseball, defensively, where you are most comfortable. And there's a lot of guys that can play utility, and they're good at that. But even those guys, and I talk to some of our utility guys, and I say, okay, now be real honest with me. What position, if you had to play the rest of your life and you could never play any of the other positions, would you be best at? And I'm always right in my mind when they tell me what position. Some guys say third base, some guys play outfield, some guys say second base, whatever. And I think that you are most comfortable physically, mentally, emotionally, and all those things at one position in baseball.
Right. So did you ever pitch?
Well, probably when I was 9 or 10 years old.
Okay, so you never pitched on. Because sometimes they'll take, the shortstop ends up being also that, so he pitches as well. So.
Yeah, sure.
So, you didn't pitch at that point. Did you have any aspirations at that point? When Decatur comes to you and asks you for a tryout, did you then go back to school and start thinking, you know what, maybe not. Maybe I'm a little bit better than I think I am, and maybe there might be a career for me in Major League Baseball. Did you ever have that? I'm sure you dreamt about it, I'm sure.
You wonder. Yeah, you wonder about it. And you kind of, how would it be in minor leagues? It's bus trips, and it's tough. But and I knew that. And there were a lot of minor leagues at the time, many more than today.
Yeah.
But it was after my first year of football, and the quarterback, Vic Armstrong, and I finished up in the national ratings as far as passing. Me receiving, he passing. And the radio station, WJBC's local radio station in Bloomington Normal, that's the one that carried the Cardinals, came to me, and there were 4 high schools in town and 2 colleges. And they did a lot of basketball. Mm-hmm. I didn't play basketball. I played football, baseball. So there was a gap in between. And so after my sophomore year of football, which Vic and I did very well, WJBC came and said, would you want to help us do some basketball, high school and college, and go out with the guys who were the mainstays at the time, Don Munson, Don Newberg, Lanny Larison. They were good. And they had me doing a high school game, and I would do the starting lineups. They would do the play-by-play. I'd do a halftime interview, and then I'd do the totals at the end of the game.
Oh, yeah.
So this went on for a couple of months. Don Newberg was the news director at WJBC, and he was a very good sports guy. And I went out with him, Bloomington High School and Decatur. The Decatur Reds and the Purple Raiders of Bloomington were playing a high school game. 4 quarters, 8-minute quarters. And at a little radio station like that, the commercials are timed back at the studio. And you had a stopwatch at the site, Bloomington High School. And so there it was, and after the first 4 minutes or whatever, somebody called a timeout, and Don Newberg said, and so the score is Bloomington 8, Decatur 6, and we'll be right back. And he turned on the stopwatch. 1 minute later, he'd start talking because they played a 1-minute commercial back in the studio.
Yeah, and you're not hearing it in your ear anyway, so you're on your own.
Yeah, you're beholden to the stopwatch. Right. So now the first quarter ends, and Newberg says, he said, I got to go to the bathroom. He said, so keep your eye on that stopwatch, and if I'm not back in time, just talk, just do something. He said, I'll be right back. I'll hurry back. So away he goes. So the clock is ticking, and you're shaking.
You're starting to sweat.
Oh, yeah, really. Cold sweat, hot sweat, every sweat. And so where in the heck is Newberg? And I keep looking, and now they're coming back on the court, and now the ball's in play. And where's Newberg? Well, nowhere to be seen. So I started to say, I have no idea what I said. I probably had a problem figuring out my name, but I said something, and they're playing, and they're going on, and they're going, and where's Newberg? And now there's a commercial, and I look at the stopwatch, and I shut up. And 1 minute later, Newberg is still, he must be having a problem. So they're back on the court, and away they go at the end of the half. And now there's a commercial break, and I got my eye on the stopwatch, and here he comes. So I didn't have to go to the bathroom.
No,
he said, I just wanted to see how you'd do. And I said, how'd I do? Probably awful. I'd love to hear a tape. No, I wouldn't.
I think you would.
I think it'd be funny.
I just think it'd be awesome. I just think that'd be the best thing ever. We could find a tape of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nowhere to be found, I'm sure.
Yeah, right.
Because that was the live broadcast.
Yes, exactly.
And you would tape a game, then another 2 guys would go out and tape the normal community game. So then they'd play a tape of that after the Bloomington Decatur game.
Wow.
That's, small-time radio, but what a great, it's really a very, very good radio station and really good people. And there have been people who have worked at that station who have gone on to major jobs.
Yeah. And for him to do that was so incredible for you.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look back on that, you just go, wow. just wow. Yeah.
Yeah, and apparently he I don't think it bothered him to do that. I mean, I think
his ego didn't get in the way of worrying about this young high school kid doing what I'm supposed to be doing,
Yeah, but I think that in his heart he knew that I'd probably do it. I didn't know that. Yeah. I mean, I just did it.
You had to do it.
I didn't have any choice.
The best thing was he never told you. I mean, you were just, all of a sudden you're sitting there going, oh, my God. Oh, my God, what do I do? Start talking, Denny. Yeah. And you've been talking ever since.
Talking ever since.
So you did that for how long?
Well, my last 3 years in college. I'd do basketball. And then my last 2 years of football, if there was a Friday night high school game locally, I could do that game and then get home and get a good night's rest and be ready to play football the next afternoon. But it was just it was a wonderful education, and as I said, no tuition involved. And I mean, my dad was paying the tuition at Western, but I had a half scholarship anyways.
Yeah, for football, baseball.
Yeah, but just the wonderful advantage of working at that radio station doing sports, and then the last year in college they had a little 5-minute sportscast at 5 minutes to 6, and after football practice, I'd run down to the studio or drive down to the studio and get a little pieces of paper and do a 5-minute sports show. Yeah,
teletype.
Exactly.
Take it off the old teletype.
Exactly.
Clicking in the background of
you could hear it go.
every radio station in America back in the day. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. But okay, so what was your major at school?
Well, when I started to figure out that maybe I'd want to broadcast a little bit, I took some speech courses and then PE. So it was kind of a double major, PE and speech. Yeah. Primarily.
Did you think you were going to get into coaching maybe for the PE?
That was a thought. Yeah. I thought maybe my dad went to Illinois State. That was a teacher's college.
Right.
And so he was going to coach, but he ended up in the Navy in World War II, and then he ended up at State Farm Insurance for 44 years.
Yeah, in fact, his career, he may have been a major league player except for World War II, right? I mean, he was a pretty good athlete, correct?
George Matthews had 2 offers from major league teams. One was Cincinnati and one with the White Sox. And then World War II came along, and then I came along during World War II.
Yeah.
And when
you ruined everything,
I sure did. I screwed up his whole career. But I didn't have any choice. I showed up.
Yeah, that's right. It wasn't your fault.
No, it wasn't my fault. But by the time he got back from the Navy, there I was, and he figured out I better get a job at State Farm Insurance Company that's headquartered in Bloomington. So it was kind of a natural thing, and it turned out great for him.
Yeah, right. And so you're now getting out of college, and what are you thinking at that point when you're going to graduate, and all of a sudden I got to go out and find a job? So what are you thinking about at that point?
Well, my dad was in personnel at State Farm, so myself and my 3 younger brothers never had a problem getting a job at State Farm in the summer at the park or at the warehouse. I worked in the warehouse for a couple of years, and all the time still doing work at WJBC, doing basketball and football. And then I got an offer to go to Peoria and do TV and radio and sports. And I spent, after about a year in Peoria, a little over a year, I had a chance to go to KMOX TV in St. Louis, CBS, and do Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday sports on TV. Wow. And all that time, now we're talking 68, 69, I learned that there were 4 new teams in baseball. One of them was going to be in Kansas City. And that's when I decided I'd go to St. Louis, make a tape of a Cardinals, I think it was Cubs or Mets, somebody I don't remember, do a tape for a resume and send it to the people in Kansas City who were auditioning. Buddy Blattner had already been hired as the #1 announcer, and I knew all about him. Mm-hmm. And so I went to St. Louis with a friend of mine, Charlie Brannon. He carried the tape recorder. I carried all the other stuff, and we did a tape, and that's what I sent to the people that were auditioning.
Where did you do the tape from in the stadium?
In the press box.
Oh, they let you come in the press box. So you had a press pass anyway, correct? Because of the KMOX.
Well, WMBD Peoria was a Cardinal affiliate.
Right. Okay.
So there was no problem. There was no cable TV. There was the local radio and the visiting radio. And there were about 10 empty radio and TV booths.
Yeah, exactly.
And so no problem getting in. Charlie and I went in, set up the tape recorder, and did the game.
And they had no problem you doing that at all, which I think that's great. That's just
it was so easy. And we had little passes to get into the ballpark and set up, and away we went. Wow. And drove back to Bloomington, about a 3-hour drive, and I put it together and sent it to Kansas City.
Yeah, I think you said your 3 best half innings. What would you consider your 3 best half innings? I think you said the best part of this is, what was your resume on officially? What was your resume on that you sent? No, I meant I know you have the tape.
Yeah.
But what did you send your physical resume on as far as on paper is concerned?
This is a friend of mine in Peoria who suggested that I do something a little bit different. Do you remember I know you spent a lot of time in saloons and in bars in your
Really?
younger years.
You know what?
I'm just kidding.
I did.
Well, you remember the round trays that the servers would put the
Yeah,
glasses
sure.
of
The
beer at
tin, the
bottom of
aluminum tray. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
they bring it over, and
Yeah.
it was always Budweiser or Schlitz or whatever the
Yeah.
product was that they wanted to advertise. So I went to one of the taverns, and I never was in the taverns in Bloomington. I did not drink in college. I didn't have a beer until I got into baseball. That's another story. But I got this
We'll explore that one. Go ahead.
the round tray. No, we won't. And put my tape and a picture. So it was a great picture of myself, and a little resume of what I'd been doing at WJBC and what I had done in college, and away it went.
Wow.
So about 3 weeks later, I got a call from the people who were doing the auditions, and they said, thank you for what you sent us. You are one of, I think they said, 250 people who are auditioning for the job with Buddy Blattner. And I thought, oh, all right, great.
Yeah.
I got a shot at this.
I'm in the top 250.
Only two, yeah, really. But as it turned out, every month, now we're talking, I did this in June, probably went down to St. Louis.
It's June of 68, correct?
Correct, yeah. And every month they would call and say, well, you're still in the running. We're down to 150. I think, oh, man, now I'm in.
Yeah.
So, and then 50, and then 25, and then 3. And Buddy Blattner called. And he said, would you want to come down to St. Louis and to my house? That's where he lived in the winter. And we'll have a pizza and, have a drink and talk. Mm-hmm. So I said, well, yeah, I'll drive down. When do you want me to come down? It was a Friday. And he said, why don't you get down here about 4 o'clock, 4:30? I said, fine. And he knew it was about 2.5, 3-hour drive, so down I went. He had a very nice finished basement with a little bar and a pool table and a ping pong. Not ping pong, table tennis.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Buddy Blattner was the world champion table tennis player for 2 years.
Oh, you gotta be kidding
and
me.
I said, I'd love to play ping pong. He said, no, we're not going to play ping pong. We're going to play table tennis. That was an experience. And he had that stroke. It's not the
Yeah,
flat,
right. It was
it's in the spin.
And the spin was on the ball. It hit and him take off the table. Yeah.
So he had and he knew what he was doing, and he kept pushing me back further and further and further, and then he spun it so that the thing would just come over the net and drop dead, and it was just spinning, and I was almost in the other room. That was an experience. But we sat there and talked and talked. I told my dad when I left, I said, I'm going to see Buddy around 4:30, so I'll be home around 10. And I was the next day.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So you stayed overnight.
Yeah. Well.
You stay at Buddy's?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
So then about 7 in the morning, I said, well, I better get on back. And I got back. I pulled in the driveway, and my dad was cutting the yard. And I said, I told you I'd be home at 10. He said, how'd it go? And I said, I think pretty good. And he kept me there for all night.
Right.
So, yeah, but at that
I think
point.
Dad might have known that.
Yeah, at that point in time, I felt pretty good.
Yeah.
You're never sure.
Yeah, right.
But then 3 or 4 days later, I got a call, and they said, I guess you got the job. And I said, no, I didn't know, but thanks for telling me.
Yeah. Gosh, that is just.
So that's how that all.
Yeah, right. And then, do you know who the other guys were? You have any idea who the other finalists, the other 2 finalists were?
I don't. But Buddy told me later, he said there were guys who had been in the minor leagues for 25 or 30 years, guys who were up-and-comers and were just getting into the business. There were guys who would go to their basement or the den and make up a game and have sound effects, for the bat and the ball. He said, you can't believe the different things.
It was a Schlitz tray. It was a Schlitz tray is what did it, right?
Well, what I did was actually, how did Busch figure into this? Busch beer. I figured one of the things I put in my resume was, I hope you don't think this is Schlitz, and Busch, of course, is Anheuser-Busch.
Yeah, right.
And I said something like, I hope you don't think I'm a Busch leaguer. Get it?
Oh,
B-U-S-C-H.
Yes.
I hope you don't think I'm a bush leaguer for having done a Cardinal game and applying for a job where the primary sponsor is Schlitz.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it was corny, but
was,
the guy in
I know.
Peoria was right on when he said, make it a little different. And
He was right on. That was because it stood out. I mean, everything else.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys are sitting around. They have 250 tapes sitting there.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, this one comes in. Well, hold it. Before we start looking, let's look at this guy first over here.
what's he thinking about?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Or we'll save him. We'll give him 250, 200, 150. He's still there. We haven't heard his tape yet. 100, to 50 or whatever, and then took it up. But that's incredible because that's the way these jobs are very coveted, which is amazing. And you heard Harry Caray and Jack Buck growing up all your life. I'm from Pittsburgh, and that was Bob Prince.
Sure.
I grew up with him, and those voices become the voices of summer. Did you want to pattern yourself after somebody, or did you just want to be yourself the way you ended up being Denny Matthews?
Yeah, well, Buddy and I got into that real early. When we got to spring training for that first year, we'd go out and have pizza a couple times a week and sit and talk about the broadcast. And he said, one of the things he said was, I don't want you to ever think that you have to do the game the way I do it. He said, I want you to do the game the way you want to do it. I want you to create your own style. I want you to create your own personality. He said, if we talk back and forth during the game, that's fine. If we don't, that's fine. Whatever you want to do. He said, you got 3 innings, I got 6, and we're a team. And that's the way it's going to be. And he was so helpful in so many different ways. He just knew how to produce a good radio broadcast. And, of course, he worked for the Cardinals, the St. Louis Browns, and then later the Angels.
Right.
And then from the Angels, he came to Kansas City. But he was a nationally known broadcaster. He worked on the Game of the Week, Saturday afternoon Game of the Week with Dizzy Dean. And they were nationally known.
Yeah, they're legendary.
Legendary
guy,
yes.
People don't realize that now because, especially young people don't realize how great Buddy Blattner was, And you being here as the number 2 guy, you're thinking, well, he's probably going to be here for, forever or one of those things.
Yeah.
You're thinking, I'm going to roll with this because I can learn so much from him. And then things eventually, worked in your favor that way as well. So.
Yeah, he did baseball. He played baseball. He was a major league player. Mm-hmm. He also was a basketball broadcaster for the St. Louis Hawks, the NBA team. And that was on KMOX radio, which I could get in Bloomington in the wintertime, and I'd turn on and listen to the Hawks. Frank, he was as good a basketball broadcaster as I've ever heard. He was he was maybe a better basketball announcer than baseball.
Yeah.
And he was a great baseball announcer. And not many people remember that, but I would listen to him. So I knew him. I knew of him. And, of course, in meeting him in St. Louis, I really got to know him. And then our spring training, little pizza nights, and we'd talk about the broadcasts. And I finally, maybe midway through our first season together, I said, you know what? I've wondered, why did you – and he was the most prominent guy as far as getting the one he wanted to work with. I said, why did you end up picking me with all these other people, many who had a lot of experience and I really hadn't had any? And he said, there were a couple of reasons. He said, number one, you took time to go to St. Louis and tape a game. And it was a major league game. He said, you took the time and he said, I listened to it very carefully. And I could tell that you had a good feel for the game. And then he said, I could tell by how you handled it that you had played the game. And he said, I thought that was a plus. And then the other thing was, it was a brand new team. I figured I'd get a young guy with, no experience, and we'd hit it off.
Right.
Apparently that long session in St. Louis at his
The overnight
house,
session.
Yeah, was the key.
Yeah, right. And for him, too, I think he also saw somebody he could help mold, too, because eventually Buddy's going to leave.
Right.
And he probably had a little bit of that in the back of his mind anyway, because he'd done so much stuff anyway. But the other thing is, I'd be remiss before we go to the first day of work. And what did your dad give you in order to send you off to Kansas City? that he bought for you and you took to work with you every day.
The famous briefcase.
The famous briefcase. I mean, he gave, and you I think you still have it, right?
Oh yeah.
You still take it to the stadium every day. And that was
Every game.
1968. I think he gave that to you, or 69, just before you started, right?
Right.
Wow.
That was a Christmas present.
Gosh.
So.
That is just that is. I mean, that is really cool. I mean, that tells you all you have to say about your dad and mom and home life or whatever. I mean, that how great is that? I mean, that is just the best thing ever. He would give you something like that to carry with you. He not knowing how much it meant to you, that then carried on.
Yeah.
For the rest of your life.
Well, it's comfortable, and I know where everything is.
Yeah, right. So, it's well worn. I think.
It's been abused a little bit.
It's broken in. Yeah,
very well.
It's broken in.
Very well.
So you're rolling right along now. You're with Buddy. You guys are doing Royals baseball. You got great ownership with Mr. K and with Ewing Kaufman, and Mrs. K, of course, just terrific. In fact, she was probably more instrumental than Mr. K to get the Royals here after they lost the A's. When did Buddy start talking to you about the fact that, you know what, I think I'm going to go to the Ozarks?
That was probably our third or fourth year together. I mean, I could tell that he was, getting ready to shut it down and enjoy retirement because he was a hard worker. He was a wonderful mentor, coach, whatever. He and my dad got along great. They were about the same age. So he was kind of like a father figure away from home. But I could tell that he was getting ready to shut it down to a degree. And so that was it. And once he announced his retirement, then
it was just automatic, too. You're going to be the main guy. And now you're going to have to go out and find somebody to be your sidekick. Right? Yeah. Which you did. And then you ended up with many guys who ended up being, your color analyst or whatever. And I think the thing I heard about you, and I just heard it about the Buddy Blattner thing, and I obviously experienced it because of so many games that I've listened to too with your voice on radio. You not only described the game, but because you played and you knew the game so well, and you loved the game of baseball so much, you also had really good instincts to predict what was going to happen next. Okay, whether they're going to sacrifice here, should they bunt here? It's 3-0. They're going to do this here or whatever. Guys on second, and explain the game from that strategy standpoint. And I think that's what set you apart. I think from virtually anybody else.
Well, the one thing I never, and again I bring Buddy Blattner into the conversation. He said you don't ever want to second guess what the manager does. You're not the manager of the team, so he said, what I would like for you to learn to do is to set up the possibilities. So a pinch hitter in the eighth inning, whatever the situation is in the game, looking ahead, this might happen or this might happen. But don't, after whatever you think is going to happen, the manager makes a move and it doesn't work. Don't say, well, why did he do that instead of this? But he said, don't do that. That's second guessing. Right. He said, first guess. Tell the people what the possibilities are. What are the options for the manager? And then he picks that option, and it either works or it doesn't. Yeah. You have nothing to do with it. So he said, don't. He said, that's it. That's all you need to do. And it's pretty good advice.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. You don't want to be saying in the seventh inning, boy, that was a dumb move. Yeah. Okay, we're going to go to break now. We'll be right back.
Yeah, no. That would not be good for him.
No, that would not be good for your longevity as far as being a broadcaster is concerned. So you've done innumerable games, for the Royals in Major League Baseball, and have been the voice of the Royals. Every time somebody hears your voice, they all have their own memories. I think the best thing was I know they got off to they're an expansion team, so they're going to have expansion woes. But having Mr. K as an owner, that didn't last that long for that team to start to put some players in there who could play, and now all of a sudden, the next thing you know, you're competing against the Yankees year in, year out. I think Mr. K had the second highest payroll in Major League Baseball behind the Yankees. Yeah. So it was a thing where, of course, we should be competing against the Yankees. We have the second highest payroll in baseball. Just talk about those years leading up to that point where now all of a sudden they are a contender every year.
Yeah, and it didn't take long.
No,
as you said. Actually, 6 teams in that division, and the Royals finished ahead of two of the established teams. No, one of the established teams and the other expansion team. So the Royals finished 4th out of 6 teams the very first year. The second year, they took a step back and weren't very good at all. But Cedric Tallis, the general manager, made some amazing trades, all almost exclusively with the National League. The National League teams at that point in time in baseball, in the late 60s, early 70s, National League was far superior. Mm-hmm. He would always trade with the National League team. And he got some great players that were really the keys to getting the Royals to be a contender very quickly.
Yeah.
Got Amos Otis early. He got Freddie Patek and Jerry May and Bruce Del Canton and Cookie Rojas and on,
wow.
all with the National League.
Yeah.
And the Royals were, by the third year, they were competitive. Now, the A's were the power in our division. But boy, the Royals were on their tail.
Which is the old Royals team.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Oakland A's now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's why it was such a great rivalry.
Yeah.
And the fans in Kansas City have never forgotten or forgiven Charles O. Finley.
No.
Who
took the team away, yeah.
Took the team away. But it was a great rivalry, and boy, by the middle of the 70s, the Royals not only caught the A's, but passed them.
Yeah, passed them, and then it was the Yankees who kept just every year. It was the Yankees keeping them out of the World Series. It was the only team ahead of them in Major League Baseball. George Steinbrenner, their owner, who was like Mr. K, I'm not going to lose. I got money. I'm going to spend it, and this is what we're going to do. You know, he looked at it more of not as a hobby, but he was a very competitive guy, obviously. But my business over here, this is my enjoyment. So I'm going to make sure these guys are really competitive.
Yeah, that was his mindset, and what a smart guy.
Yeah.
About everything. And I remember in his later years, he had that beautiful suite down the third baseline, and some nights Muriel would be there with him and friends. Some nights he'd just be the only one there. And when I'd look over, and if he was the only one in the booth, why, I'd go down for 2 or 3 innings and just sit down. And you talk about a college education. We'd talk a little baseball, but a lot about life, a lot about business, a lot about you name it. And he always had a great idea about whatever. And it was so interesting just sitting there and talking to him. And he was just a wonderful, wonderful guy, and so good for Kansas City, obviously. And then Muriel was, of course, a big part of him getting them.
She loved her players.
Oh,
she loved the guys.
And then Julie Irene has carried things on here in Kansas City and in true Kaufman fashion.
Yeah, with the foundation and, of course, the Symphony Hall and everything. You know, Kaufman Center is just incredible. Yeah. But also, being the broadcaster you were and you coming up, and all of a sudden you're doing all these national broadcasts because of, the Royals and the Yankees and all these games, and people are hearing you everywhere. It's bound to happen. People are going to start to come after you and say, hey, Denny, you sure you want to stay in Kansas City? And I think Mr. K had a lot to do with you staying and remaining here. Tell that as well. I think I know you had at least 2 really big offers and probably many, many more feelers and people trying to probe and trying to figure out what you were going to do, long term. And then, you probably went to Mr. K and say, look, I got offer from here and offer from here. What do you think? Yeah,
that's exactly what happened. After my second year with Buddy, the White Sox called, and I flew up to Chicago and sat down and talked to Leo Breen, who was one of their top guys, and they offered me a job. So I went back to Kansas City and went out and saw Mr. Kaufman, and I told him what happened. And he said, you should be flattered. He said, that's really nice, and it's nice that other teams are aware of you. But he said, I'll tell you what, we like you here, and you can stay here as long as you want. I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. But I wasn't unhappy. I wasn't looking for another job. Right. But when I got the job with the Royals, growing up right between the Cubs and the Cardinals and the White Sox, I figured if you do a decent job for 4 or 5 years, you might get an offer. Well, the Cardinals would have been my dream job. Sure. Cubs would have been the second. And so the White Sox offered me the job. I went back, and then I had to call Leo and tell him, I said, now you know what, I'm gonna stay. And then the next year he called again. After the third year, he called again. And I went up to Chicago, and we talked, and I said, well, let me think about it, and I'll go back. And I'm thinking, you know what? You're happy. Kansas City's a great place to be. It's a comfortable town. It's got big city advantages as well as small town advantages. It's a nice combination. I wasn't unhappy. I liked the people I was working with. And I thought, I'm going to stay. And I did. Then in the 90s, I got a call from Bob Hyland, who was the general manager at KMOX in St. Louis, and of course they're the Cardinal affiliate. And he said, we'd like you to come over and be a part of the Cardinal broadcast. Well, you know what, Frank? It was 2 weeks before spring training. I had signed my contract with the Royals.
Sure.
So I said to Bob Hyland, I said, Bob, this would have been my dream job. Mm-hmm. I don't know what would have happened if you had called in October, but I said, I'm going to be in spring training with the Royals in 2 weeks. I can't bail out on them.
Yeah.
And I signed a contract. I'm going to stay true to that contract. And he said, well, I appreciate you being so candid and honest about things. And then he finished by saying, but we're going to get you over here eventually.
Wow.
I thought, that's
okay,
nice. That's nice to hear.
That's a nice trampoline to have. You know, the golden trampoline sitting there waiting for you in case something.
But the only other thing that I had was when the Yankees signed, I don't know how many $1 million cable contract in the late 90s, early 2000s. I don't know exactly what year it was. And they called and asked me if I would want to be their lead broadcaster on their cable games. They were going to do 100 games or something. And so I started writing things down about New York. You know, how do I get around? Where would I stay? Where
am I going to live? What airport am I going to fly out of?
Yeah. No, and I called him a couple of days later, and I said, no, I'm solid here in KC.
Yeah.
And so, but it was very attractive. I mean, it was quite a bit of money.
You bet.
Quite a bit more than I would be making here. But I mean, you better be making more money if you're going to live in New York.
Yeah, you bet.
I don't know. I don't think I'd been in New York enough to know that I wouldn't have been that comfortable.
Yeah, and I think anybody successful in this business has been pulled one way or another by somebody offering them a job somewhere. When I was at Channel 4 here in Kansas City for so long, I got a job offer in Pittsburgh, which is my hometown, in Philadelphia, where I went to college. And each time I called a buddy of mine. And I'd call him, and he worked in Houston, Texas. And I'd call him, and I'd say, I got a job in Pittsburgh. Well, he said, hey, you know what? You call me all the time with this crap. He said, are you happy in Kansas City? I said, yeah. He said, why would you ever go? In 3 years, those people might hate you. He said, especially Philadelphia. He said, they're really going to hate you in 3 years. So, just stay where you are. And there's really something to that. And as we always talk about, there's just something about Kansas City. There's just something about, like you said, the people.
The comfort level. Yeah.
Yes.
But don't you think that there's a gut feeling about if you're going to make a key move in your life, there's a gut feeling that says do or don't. And if you're really honest about it and true to it, you're probably going to do the right thing.
Yeah.
But as far as job offers, I know you've known so many guys in the business, they're always looking for the next job.
Yep.
They're never satisfied with what they've got. They're always looking ahead. And it's really interesting. And some guys are just very happy with what they have and who they work with. And by the way, Pittsburgh, I love Bob Prince.
Yeah, he was.
I could hear Bob Prince in Bloomington, Illinois.
Yeah, KDKA radio.
KDKA.
50,000 watt non-direct. Back in those days, they'd have directional and sundown and all that. 50,000 watts, 24 hours a day.
Yeah. But I could hear Bob Prince, to me, was a riot. And I finally got to meet him, and I loved him. He was so nice to me.
He's a great guy.
Yeah, great guy, and really quirky, funny.
Oh, funny guy, yeah.
Yeah.
You were, too. You had your own stuff. I could never ask you what your favorite team was or your favorite player because that's just unfair, but we will do some word association coming up here in a little while. But just everything for your career, the ups and downs and everything you went through here you have to look back on and just go, this has been absolutely amazing. I mean, I've been blessed. I've just been a blessed guy.
Yeah. And I mean, as many different people that I've worked with, there would bound to be somebody that you just didn't get along with.
Oh,
It's
absolutely.
never happened.
Yeah.
It's never happened. And I'm amazed because, and you hear stories, and I'm sure you've heard stories about putting two guys together and it just didn't click. It didn't
you
work.
can tell.
Yeah, and in fact, it would be acrimonious at times. They'd be at each other's throats.
Yeah, not worried about the game. They're in there,
Yeah, they're airing it out right there in public. And
right there on their own shoes.
But you're right. I've been blessed with great partners.
Yeah.
And, we've all gotten along really good, and it's just been a great ride.
Yeah, and you've done the radio and TV thing, so you were ready for that, which was absolutely no problem. So that really helped as well because you knew that was probably bound to happen here when the radio starts crossing over and some guys want to do some radio and then I got to go over and do television.
Yeah.
It just gets to be sort of convoluted there. How much changed with when you left? No, you didn't leave, but I mean when you had to cross over, do a few innings on or a game on TV, and then your radio broadcast totally different than television.
Yeah.
So because the visuals are describing a lot of the game for you. I mean, that's hard to do when you come from radio.
Yeah. The first year, 1969, the Royals televised, I think, about 12 games, all on the road, no home games. So Buddy Blattner and I were the two announcers, and we did a doubleheader in New York one Sunday afternoon, and we both did all 18 innings. Wow. Thank God we didn't go extra innings.
Yeah.
But, yeah, and that's just the way it was. That's the way it was done. And in most cases in the major leagues at that time, there wasn't a whole lot of TV. Some teams televised a lot more than others, obviously. But Royals didn't, and there were a few teams that had a very, very limited TV schedule. Right. So it wasn't a burden, but it was fun. I enjoyed it. And then later on, Fred White and I would go back and forth between radio and TV. And remember Denny Treese?
Yeah, Denny did. We did, when I was at Channel 4, we had the Royals for X, I guess, 50, 75 games a year.
Right.
I forget exactly. Most of those were on the road. They'd have a fan appreciation game, I think.
Yes.
And they'd have a home game.
Yeah.
Okay. It was against somebody that was in the bottom of the bottom of the basement somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. But Denny was the TV guy, period. I don't think he ever did radio.
Right.
And then Fred and I had go over and help him. So, we did a lot of TV, and it was fun. I enjoyed it. It was I liked the instant replay because you could kind of teach.
Yes,
I could kind of coach or teach.
You love doing that.
Yeah. Why did that play break down? Why was that such a good play? Or the instant replay was fun, and I did enjoy that part of it. Yeah,
you had a lot of great partners. I know. I think Steve Busby only did radio. I with TV with Denny.
Yes.
Treese, he was a hoot. I loved Buzz.
Oh yeah,
he was great. And then he went on with the Rangers forever. Yep. And he was great. But you had a lot of great partners yourself, didn't you?
Oh, excellent. Yeah, and very good.
Yeah,
very good. The interesting or the odd thing is that Buddy Blattner played baseball.
Right.
He was a major league player. I have never worked with an analyst who was a former major league player. Everybody that I've worked with since Buddy left had never played
the game
in the big leagues. Some had never played the game that much. So one of the things, here we go again with Buddy Blattner. One of the things he told me at our pizza fest was, you ate
a lot of pizza.
Oh my! Yeah, I must have weighed 210 or something. Now I have a beer with a pizza. That's when I started.
Now we go,
beer and pizza.
That's it. Perfect.
But I remember him saying to me, he said, "If you're going to be," these are his exact words, "if you're going to be worth your salt as a Major League Baseball announcer, you have to not only describe the play, but then you have to analyze it.
Yeah.
You have to tell the people what happened, and then you have to tell the people why it happened." And I was thinking at that time, well, I grew up listening to guys who did that, some more than others. But it's always fun for me to do it. Why did that play break down? Who messed it up? Or who made a perfect throw and a ball hit into left center field, and the left fielder picks it up and throws it to the shortstop out in short left field. Now there's a play at the plate. Well, if the outfielder doesn't give the shortstop a throw on the glove side. If he has to reach across his body for the throw, and then he's going to have to make a complete turn to make a throw to the plate, it's probably not going to work. So if the throw is to the left side or the glove side, he can make a little quarter turn, make it a good, accurate throw to the plate. So little things like that are fun to talk about, and people, sometimes I would say things like that, and whoever I was working with would look at me like, well, that's right. How did you know that?
But why didn't I know that? What am I doing? He didn't play the game. That's why. And of course, you wouldn't say that on the radio, of course. But the whole thing for you too is that was what radio was. I mean, radio is if you don't, you have no visual. Okay,
Right.
You're not watching. You're listening. So that air, called dead air, has to be filled. You have to talk about it. And just to blather on about re-describing, the play is not the way you want to do it. No. You want to give them something else to learn.
Yeah. And I guess it just came naturally because, like Buddy said, you better be able to tell them why.
Yeah.
Not only describe the play as best you can, give them that word picture, but then break the play down a little bit more. Yeah. So
all right, we're going to do some word association. You ready?
What's that?
Or some, well, don't worry, you'll figure it out, okay? I'm sure. Just put your radio hat on.
I got it.
Okay, and I don't have these in any sort of order or chronological order or whatever. Your thoughts on DH, designated hitter?
I hated it at first because I grew up National League.
Oh, yeah.
National League held out for a long, long time. And I thought it changed the game. It slowed the game down quite a bit. National League games all of a sudden were quite a bit quicker than American League games. And again, the National League was a better league and better players, and they knew it, so they resisted the DH. But in my heart, I just knew that eventually the National League was going to have the DH, and it's going to be all of baseball. And I've accepted it. It's okay. Yeah. I like the game as it was. The pitchers hitting once in a while sometimes didn't work out very well for the pitcher, but there were some decent hitters.
We just lost Al Fitzmaurice.
Yes,
and God bless him. God rest his soul. But he was 242 career hitter as a pitcher. I mean, that's pretty that's higher than some of the everyday guys are hitting. You know what I mean? Which was phenomenal. So there were some good hitting. Gosh, I'm going to forget. Not saves. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'll remember in a minute.
Well, Greinke was.
I'm sorry. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, Greinke was really a great athlete.
He could have been Shohei Ohtani.
Well, he would have preferred to be a shortstop, as he told me many times.
Always.
He said, I'd rather play shortstop than pitch. I only get to play once every 5 days.
Right.
If I played shortstop, I can play every day. Al Fitzmaurice, was signed by the White Sox as an outfielder.
Right.
And he became a pitcher. They converted him to a pitcher, and he became the first player in Royals history to get, as a switch hitter, hits in the same game. One is a left-handed hitter, one is a right-handed
Exactly.
hitter.
He still holds that record. It's still only him.
Yep, only him.
Gosh, he's terrific. Okay, Rush Limbaugh.
Rush Limbaugh, who worked
Folks,
for the Royals.
Go ahead. Yeah, you explain what he used to do.
He was in radio, as you know. He worked at a lot of different radio stations here in town. He loved the Pittsburgh Steelers deep in his heart.
He was a Pittsburgh guy.
And we used to play touch football. Thursday afternoon, media touch football. And Rush was always at the game. And there'd usually be 4-on-4, 5-on-5, maybe even 6-on-6 if we had a good crowd and it was a nice day. But Rush would come out with a Pittsburgh Steeler jersey. It was a beautiful jersey. And he had a home and it was an authentic jersey. Home and road, Pittsburgh Steelers. And the ugliest yellow sweatpants you have ever seen.
The gold, Pittsburgh's black and gold. Now, come on.
There it was. And he would play, and he would love it. He wasn't very good. He was not a great athlete, but boy, he loved it. And that was, I think he lived for Thursday afternoon touch football. But it was always, we had 4-on-4 or 5-on-5. You would rotate as a quarterback a bit. It was always Rush, you count to 2 and stay in and block. I saw Rush, you block. So one day we're playing, and Rush was very much a part of it. And I thought, you know what? He ought to catch a pass. And so I told him, I said, we were in a situation where he had 2 or 3 guys go to the right corner of the end zone. And I said, Rush, just hesitate for a 3 count and then just haul your fanny over into the left corner of the end zone. And then I'm going to roll right. I was quarterback at the time. It was my turn. I was going to roll right, and everybody, my receivers would all go to the right, and the defense would all go to the left. And so we did, and I rolled out, and I stopped. And now I see him all by himself in the end zone. And I've got a problem. Do I throw a firm line drive pass, or do I hit a
float one
out there, or something in between? I decided something in between. And he was probably 35 yards away from me, so it was a decent.
He has to think about it for a while, too.
Yeah. And so away goes the pass, and it was accurate and more floating than line. And his eyes got real big, and his hands came out I'm going to catch it if it's the last thing I ever do. And Frankie, it came down, and it hit him in the chest, but he had his hands in the good position, and he clutched it to his chest. Touchdown. First time he'd ever.
Oh, my God.
So we're walking back down the field to kick off, and he comes over and he said, Denny, there's something you should know. I said, what's that, Rush? That's the first touchdown that I've ever had. And I thought, wow, what a nice moment, and I'm so happy to be a part of it.
Yeah, exactly.
He was so proud of that.
Oh, God.
But what a great
guy.
What a great radio broadcaster he turned out to be.
Smart guy. And the thing was, folks, for you who don't remember, he used to be in charge of bringing the national anthem singers out, the Boy Scouts in the outfield, whoever their flag bearers were that day for the national anthem. That was his job with the Royals.
Yes.
And yet he turned into this incredible icon on radio with conservative talk radio. He spearheaded the whole thing.
Yeah.
He spearheaded the whole thing. He was an incredible guy.
Yes.
Just an incredible person. Yeah. He was a lot of fun.
He had all this equipment in his house. I'd take record albums over, and he would transfer record albums, good songs that I liked, to little cassettes. Yeah. And we'd sit there for 2 or 3 hours and doing that. Just talking about other stuff. And I could tell that he's, something's there that isn't being tapped into.
What he was doing was limiting him.
Oh, totally.
But he knew.
Totally.
He knew that.
And I had a feeling. I mean, I didn't predict what was going to happen to him, for heaven's sakes. But, yeah, you belong in radio and doing a little more than you're doing now.
Exactly. All right, you're talking bobblehead.
Not talking anymore. Batteries ran out.
That is a big collector's item, son. That is a big collector's item there. The talking bobblehead. I think that was the first talking bobblehead we had, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so.
I'm sure you still have one somewhere, don't you?
Oh, yeah. I've got 2 or 3 somewhere.
Yeah, right. Okay.
I don't know if they're still talking because I don't need to hear them.
How about trains?
How about them? Well, it's a hobby. Things started by my grandfather, my mother's father, who worked on the railroad. He was an engineer in the yards in Bloomington and in Gulf Mobile in Ohio. And every once in a while, once or twice a year, my grandmother would take me down to the yards, and he'd see me. We'd wave at him. He'd get off the little diesel switch engine, come over across the tracks, pick me up, carry me across the tracks, and hand me up to the fireman. And I'd sit there and ride around with him. And that went on until I was probably 12, 13, 14 years old, and what fun. But then he started buying these little Lionel trains for me, which a lot of people have growing up.
Yeah, my brother collected those as well. And he'd start in October in the basement and overtook the basement. He'd get the horses out, the little horses. He'd put the plywood on. Yep. He'd get underneath. He'd get the drill. Oh, yeah. Drill things so the lights. He did all that. I grew up. And they were the Lionel trains, which are collector's items.
Yes.
Do you still have?
Yes.
Do you still have them?
He brought 2 little locomotives for me and little cars and a starter set basically. Sure. And those are your collector's items. And a little black switch engine and a Santa Fe diesel road engine. Yeah. And that's fun. And so I still got them in the basement. And,
do you still go? Do you go to the train show ever?
I have gone to train shows. Yeah. I've also done commercials for safety on crossing lifesaver. And don't try to beat the train across the crossing for Santa Fe and Burlington Northern and also for Union Pacific. And they told me, hey, if you ever want to jump on a freight train and go from the yards here in town down to Wellington, Kansas, or Wichita, or up to
let us know.
Up to toward Chicago, you would do it. And I'd done that in the off season, and that's fun and keeps me off the streets and out of the alleys in the wintertime.
Do you have this is almost unfair to ask, but do you have a favorite World Series? 85 maybe, or because it was the first ever, and it wasn't their first, but it was the first one they won. It wasn't the first one they were in, but the first one they won, or the 14 and 15 run that they had, or I guess they all sort of they're all feel good. Feel good moments.
No question. And I think for me, growing up a Cardinal fan, the Royals and the Cardinals in '85, that was special and a lot of fun. And people say, well, how can you root for the Royals? You always. I said, well, you know what? The Cardinals are my favorite National League team, okay? But I work for the Royals.
I know.
Ewing Kauffman signs my check, so I'm for the Royals.
Yeah, plus you had a pretty good affinity for Whitey Herzog. He was the Royals manager, and he became the Cardinals manager.
Right.
And the Royals beat the Cardinals but Whitey used to let you play in spring training games when you were a Royals broadcaster, and if he was short some guys that he wanted to say, go on out there and play, which had to be a tremendous thrill for you.
What a blast, yeah. And like Buddy Blattner, I eventually got the nerve to ask Whitey why he put me in the games, and he said, well, I used to go out maybe once or twice, a homestand, and take ground balls or take some early hitting and just mess around. The guys, and knock around with the players.
Yeah.
I was still pretty much
good way to get to know them,
age.
too.
Yeah, exactly. And they have fun with me, and So I asked Whitey eventually. I said, "Why did you let me play in some of those exhibition games?" And he said, "Well, there were a couple of reasons." He said, "Number one, I saw you out on the field taking ground balls." And he said, "I knew you had played, and I knew that if I put you in a game, you wouldn't embarrass yourself or me or the Royals or baseball in general."
The game.
And he said, and Whitey always had a reason for what he did. He said, but if you're out there and you blow an ankle, you can still go up to the booth and broadcast. If one of my players blows an ankle, I lose him for 6 weeks.
So losing you's fine.
Yeah, you can still work.
Yeah, right.
But if I lose one of my guys, well, he's on the shelf for a long time. So, it was fun. And the guys really got a kick out of it, too. And luckily, I never did embarrass myself, and it was fun. And we had some good times, and I did fine. I never did strike out. And
good.
I don't know how many at bats.
What number did you wear?
Whatever LZ gave me.
99?
Yeah.
The original 99?
I think I had a 17 and then a 21 or something.
Okay,
yeah.
21,
But 10 was my favorite number, but Dick Hauser retired that number.
Sort of had that one. Yeah, he had one. And then you also caught passes from Len Dawson.
Leonard was doing his sports show on Channel 9 on a regular basis, and he would be at the ballpark for the baseball games a lot. And we'd sit in the dugout and talk about this, that, and the other, kind of like Ewing Kauffman. And, there's always, with Len, who was very bright, there's always a topic that was fun to talk about.
And it didn't necessarily revolve around sports.
Correct.
Which was the important thing. Yeah,
so we're sitting in the dugout one afternoon at batting practice, and he said, let me ask you a question. He said, you were a receiver, and you did pretty good in college. And he said, I'm getting ready to go to Liberty for our training camp. He said, none of my receivers are in town. He said, how would you feel about coming out and just running some pass patterns for me and letting me get my arm loose and get kind of back in the swing of things and feel of things? And I said, that'd be fun. I'd enjoy that. So we would do that. And we did that for 2 or 3 years, 3 years, I think. And I also got to meet some of the guys. Willie Lanier came out to work out one day. What a nice man he was.
He's a great guy.
We had, there was a receiver. He was a former Olympian named Jimmy Hines.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Jimmy Hines could fly.
I think Hines he's a hurdler. Is he a hurdler?
He was just.
I forget what it was, but he was. Oh, I remember the name.
Oh, yeah. And he was,
really
he was lightning fast. But he could not catch a cold. And so.
like table tennis.
Yeah.
A couple paddles.
So he'd run as far as he could and Len throw as far as he could, and he'd drop it. So that went on for, I think he only worked out one time. So as we're walking off, we're in the parking lot going to our cars, like Jimmy Hines came over and he said to me, he said, are you going to training camp? And I said, no, Jimmy, I got a regular job, so I'm not gonna try out for the Chiefs this year. He said, I just wondered, you catch everything. And then Leonard came over and he said, you know what? If we could put your speed and your hands together, or if we could give Jimmy your hands, he said, we'd really have a pretty good receiver. But he said, you're not very fast, and he can't catch. So, but he said, I still got a good workout.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
No, Len was great. I loved Leonard.
Guy, yeah. Mr. and Mrs. Kaufman.
Oh, boy, I could go on for a long time.
Yeah,
We don't have enough time.
Yeah.
We talked about Mr. K a little bit and how much fun it was to just get to know him and how he was so supportive of me and just so nice to me. And one of the smartest people ever. Muriel was the person who really got his motor going. I mean, I think she and some of the people like Les Milgram and Earl Smith, who were prominent businessmen in town, really had to get together and really kind of get Ewing to get off.
Joe McGuff, too.
Joe McGuff, a lot of people. Ernie Mell, another sports writer for the Star. And they had to kind of push him a little bit. Now, this will be and Muriel finally said, you know what, Ewing, you have one of the most impressive pharmaceutical companies in the world. Nobody knows your name. And she said, why don't you buy this baseball team? It'll give you something to do. It'll be wonderful for the city and the surrounding area, and people will get to know you. You'll become a little more famous and prominent. Mm-hmm. And I think that was the final straw. Yeah, she finally kicked him in the fanny and got him to buy the team.
Yeah, I can still see them. I can still see them in their booth singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." I can still witness that. Okay, I got two more for you. You know what? We're probably going to end up doing this again sometime in the future, but we'll talk, because I could talk to you for hours.
Well,
for all the crossovers we've done before. I got two more for you.
Okay.
George Brett.
George Brett, people say, what a natural hitter. Well, what a Hall of Fame hitter. But natural, if only they knew how hard he had to work to become a Hall of Fame hitter. Mm-hmm. I saw him, I think early in his career, he was just breaking into the big leagues, and he was hitting a little bit over 150, but not much more. And Charlie asked him if he was tired of that, and George said, of course. And Charlie Lau said, I will see you out here at Kauffman Stadium tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock. And that's where it really started. Yeah. He kind of broke his swing down a little bit and gave him the fundamentals, and then George worked and worked and worked, and then he worked some more. And he also worked on his defense. He wasn't a great defensive third baseman. He became an excellent third baseman. But Frank, he was the mentally toughest player. He and Hal McRae. Hal McRae was 1A. If George was 1, Hal McRae was 1A. They were a team together in a sense. But George was so good in the clutch. He wanted to be at home plate when the game was on the line. 2 outs, runner in the scoring position, in your tie game, or you're down 1, or whatever you need. And he wanted to be at home plate. Mm-hmm. There are guys who wouldn't really be that comfortable. Let George do it, the old saying. And he did, normally. Not every time, but most of the time, because he accepted that. He accepted the pressure. He thrived on the situation. Yeah. And above and beyond that, he was a leader. Hal McRae was more of a vocal leader than George, but George was more of here's how it's done type of leader. You need a voice, and you need the example. When your best player is your hardest worker, that affects the other 24 guys on the team. And George was that, among other things. And above and beyond everything else, lives in Kansas City, still works for the Royals, and just so much fun to be around. He goes to spring training. He loves that. And he himself is a great teacher as far as hitting. And any young player who's maybe 19 or 20 years old who wouldn't come up to him in spring training and talk about it, I mean, you'd wonder about their intellect and,
Well, their future, too. And that's the other thing that amazes me is how few of those guys do that. Because they had their hitting coach from when they were in 8th grade and some college coach this way. And then here you got a baseball Hall of Famer sitting in you, one of the greatest hitters of all time.
Right.
One of the highest vote getters ever in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Okay, to get into the Hall of Fame. And he's standing there at the batting cage.
Yeah.
And you don't go over to him and say, what am I doing right? What am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
It just, that blows my mind.
Well, there might be a little intimidation factor there, too.
Yeah.
I mean, here is the Hall of Famer, and
But he's not intimidating when he's
Not at
in
all.
that situation.
Not at
He's
all. He
got some little chew in or whatever.
Yeah.
And the whole thing. He's just George.
Yeah,
He's
and
just George.
and if you're not comfortable around him, you're
Right.
never going to be comfortable around anybody.
Yeah. Oh, exactly.
He is so approachable.
Right.
And he loves it when a young player comes up and they start talking hitting.
Yeah.
And but you're right. Not many do it, and more should. All of them should.
Yeah, right.
Really.
Yeah, you can always see his competitiveness. All you need to see is go take a look at Pine Tar. Just YouTube it. That was George in a capsule. That was him. That was who he was.
Yep.
Just hit a home run. Just did a deal.
Yeah.
His clutch, the whole deal, and
Right.
just the whole thing. You just saw that.
And had tremendous respect for the game.
Yeah.
Loved Charlie Lau. Loved the guys that he played with. He was,
It was something.
1A.
And finally, the Ford C. Frick Award, Major League Pro Baseball Hall of Fame, just well deserved. I know that is one of the pinnacle moments of I know you've had a lot, but that has to be one of the pinnacle moments of your career to really say, you know what, I did the right thing.
Yeah. And again, getting back to George Brett, who went into the Hall of Fame 5-6 years
Prior.
I think prior to my getting the award. And so I went to him and I said, what to expect? And I had never been to Cooperstown. And I said, what should I expect? And I always remember he said, okay, it'll be 4 of the fastest days of your life. It'll be 4 of the most exciting days of your life. But there's so many activities that they have for you. It'll go by really, really fast. So try to slow it down as best you can and just absorb it all. And just, talk to as many people as you can and just enjoy the 4 days. And he was right. It flew by, but there was so much going on playing in the golf tournament. I got to play golf with Whitey Ford and Carlton Fisk, which was a blast.
The stories, oh my God.
Whitey Ford, 94 years old and left-handed golfer as well as pitcher. And I remember on the first tee that we played, it was the 6th hole. It was a par 4. And Whitey said, go ahead to Fisk and myself. Go ahead and hit, you guys. And so we did, and we both hit decent. We were both in the fairway, which was, for me, it was an upset. And then Whitey turned around and he said, the heck with you guys. Only he put it a little differently in words. He said, the heck with you guys. I'm going to play from the women's tee. 94 years old. And Fisk said, Whitey, you can play from whatever tees you want to play. And what a blast. But that was just an example of the activities and the dinners and the meeting people and National League players that I grew up listening.
Sure.
And had never met them.
Yeah.
And what a thrill. And, so many
and
guys.
knew you, I'm sure.
Well, they knew why I was there.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you a final story, which I always tell. The induction ceremony on Sunday, you leave the hotel and there's a bus, and it's about a 10-minute ride from the hotel over to the induction site, which is a huge field with a stage and hills for miles beyond. You can see.
It's a beautiful place.
Oh, tremendous. So I get on the bus, and about 3 minutes after I got on the bus, Willie Mays climbs on the bus, and I think it was I think it was maybe his niece was with him, a younger lady, and so they sat down. Willie sat right next to me. I was on the seat side, and he was across the aisle on the seat, and the young lady was on the window side. And I had just finished talking to Monty Urban, former player, and Monty Urban was such a nice man. And so I asked, and I knew Willie had played with him, and I was kind of breaking the ice, and we shook hands, and Willie sat down. And I said, Willie, I was talking to Monty Urban. Tell me about Monty Urban. And he gave me a little thing about Monty and loved him. And then Sandy Koufax got on the bus, and he sat right behind me. And as soon as they got on the bus, Koufax looked at Willie, and he said, Willie. And Willie stood up when they shook hands. And Koufax said, Willie, he said, when I pitched to you, you looked a lot bigger. And Willie said, well, when you were pitching, you looked a lot bigger, too. And then Willie said, I guess when we get older, we shrink. And so they laughed. And so then I had broken the ice with Willie Mays, and I said, my dad's favorite player was Stan Musial. And so I said, Willie, tell me about Stan Musial. And Willie went, oh, boy. He said, I'll tell you a story about Stan Musial. 1955 All-Star game in Milwaukee. And there were, I think he said, 6 or 7 black players, and all the rest of the guys would not really mingle and mix with the others. And he said, Stan Musial came into the clubhouse, and we were playing cards. All the black players were playing cards, playing poker. And he said, Stan Musial picked up a chair, and he came over, and he sat down at our table, and he started to play cards with us. And then Willie said, Stan didn't know how to play poker. But he said, but that was his way of saying, welcome.
And it's okay.
Nobody else did that. And he said, and then Willie said, we never forgot that. I never forgot that.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. That's just incredible.
It's a good story.
Yes,
I mean,
you have stories forever. So we're going to do this again. And we're going to do it again. Not going to talk about how much longer you're going to do Royals baseball, because I know you're going to do it for as long as you want to do it. And I know you've cut back a little bit. You are a KC treasure. Thanks so much for coming in and sitting down with me.
It's fun.
It's a good time.
Yeah. Well, now you know it's going to cost you a few more dollars for the second appearance.
Yeah, I know it is.
And I know you're doing well for me on the first
I'll get
one.
Ben to dig into the pockets here and not charge me so much to do the podcast. So we'll do it from there. Denny, thanks so much, buddy.
You're
Always
welcome,
good
Frank.
Seeing you.
You
Always
too.
Good seeing you.
We'll do it again.
God bless. Yeah. Another reason why. There's just something about Kansas City.
There's Just Something About Kansas City is a registered 501c3 nonprofit organization with the mission of documenting the stories that have built our city to inspire and educate generations to come. Our work is made possible by the generous support of local partners such as the Cockrell Family Foundation, the Bergman family, and the Sherman Family Foundation. For more information about how you can help us share these stories, visit our website at somethingaboutKC.org. Thank you.